welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com, where first and foremost, we are a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself, a loved one, maybe you've been in recovery a little while, maybe it's a long, long time, you're going to find all kinds of things on topics related to addiction, sobriety, recovery, and really living a happy, successful, sober life right here at Recovery Today. My name is Rob Haley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today, and as usual, I'm joined by another really, really cool guest. This is Chad Leoncello, and he is a professional boxer from Boston. You're going to pick that up very strongly here. And his mission is to meet people and organizations and communities where they are and to provide a roadmap to stop, think, and to act. He's the founder of something really cool that is called Sober Warriors. It's a nonprofit that provides guidance, mentorship, and fitness training to individuals suffering from substance abuse and mental health. Hey, Chad, thanks for jumping out, man. Appreciate you taking some time here.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I watched your videos and stuff, and one of our other readers, we can give him a shout-out. I misplaced his name, contacted me. Who was that contacted me? I forgot.
It was either Chris or Pat Sullivan.
I don't remember which was. So shout out to both of those guys. And they said, you got to meet this guy. And they sent me a bunch of links. I went to one of your pages and I watched kind of like a promo video. And it was you on this rooftop and you training these kids, these young kids in a boxing gym. You looked freaking big and badass and intimidating. And you had the full-on Boston accent going and whatnot. And I just liked you right off the bat, man. And so I watched for a few minutes, and I was like, yeah, we definitely want to interview this guy. Like, he looks really, really cool. And then now
Awesome.
We've traded a couple of emails. I loved your story. So I guess the first place I'd start is, like, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, and let's get into the boxing and Sober Warriors and the whole nine.
Yeah, my name is Chad Leoncello. I was born and raised in Brockton, Massachusetts, which is the home of Marvin Hagler and Rocky Marciano. So we're kind of known as the boxing capital of the world, in my opinion. Everywhere I go, I say Brockton, they say Rocky Marciano. So I grew up there, and, we had a really tough childhood. It was a tough city, and, we're a poor family where, I think a lot of my foundation of problems as far as my mental health and my addiction is kind of where it stems from. It goes along with, dad leaving my mom with 4 children. The same year, my brother, who was 16 at the time, he's my older brother. He was a sophomore in high school. He was in a car accident, and he was in a coma. And so you have mom with 4 kids, brother who was in the car accident in a coma, and that really was the foundation, I believe, of what my childhood really was. It wasn't really a childhood, as far as the way I view it now. It was more, my older brother was in the car accident. He's out of the line of, the family role, because dad's walked out. So I had to kind of grow up a little bit faster than your typical child, and I was into a lot of street fights, protecting my family, my little brother and my little sister. And like I said, mom was a single mom, so she had to be with my brother who was in a coma at the hospital. At that point, we had, I think, 2 different homes. I was in a home of a family member, and my brother and sister were in a different home. So we were a very unconnected family.
So this is really, the coma is really serious. If it was going on that long, did he turn out okay? How did that happen?
He came out of the coma. I want to say, like, it's not like the movies, where, and I explained this in my testimony, where, it's not like the movies where your brother just opens his eyes and says, hey, what's up? I'm back. It's a long, drawn out process of repair. And, it took him a good 8 or 9 months to even like start to speak. And, he is functional now. He can walk, he can talk. But if you knew my brother before the accident, you can see it's a shift in personality. It's almost, what is he, 38 years old, so in his body, but his brain is more like a 16-year-old still.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's almost like it stayed there. And, things were tough. Things were very tough. An unconnected family, me getting in trouble a lot. And at that point, I was about 14 years old. And I remember we had to go to a bingo hall. I think I told you in an email. We had to go to a bingo hall at 14 years old at like 11 o'clock at night and clean this place up. And that's not a place, number one, for a child. That can't even work because I don't think you can have a worker's permit until 16.
Right.
And
It's not like child slavery and whatnot.
yeah. So, but it paid $65, and $65 for Mom was a lot of money. I remember Mom used to open the stove, the electric stove, to heat us, before school. It was tough, and that was a lot of my problems. And I remember, you don't really know, and it started making sense to me about a year ago when I was really an alcoholic. And I was an alcoholic in high school. And I remember looking forward to a Thursday night. And Thursday night was a drinking night in high school. And Friday night was a drinking night. So if I can get through, 3 days of school, the drinking's here and the girls are here and let's party. And that's what it was all about for me. That was what it was all about.
Same.
And
Same.
It caught up to me. I ended up finishing high school, but I also did 5 years of high school. So it was,
that's got to be tough too, man. What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 2002. I was supposed to graduate in 2001, and I honestly still have nightmares here and there about me still in high school because my second senior year of high school, all my friends have already left.
That's tough, man, because then you think you're dumb. You think everybody thinks that you're dumb. All the kind of whatnot, right?
Yeah, you name it. I just remember, I just remember I got to finish high school. High school.
Yeah.
And I ended up finishing, and then after that, it was just really living life, as far as what was being thrown at me, and I was taking it as it came, whether it was a bouncing position at midnight, and that was obviously
so
more
you're
drink.
Huge, and you're intimidating right now. I could see you definitely as obviously as a boxer that you are. I could see you as a bouncer that you are. I could see you collecting the vig for somebody or something like that. You're an intimidating looking guy. When you were in high school, were you big like this too?
I wasn't big, but I was definitely athletic, and I didn't say no to a fight. There was no words of.
Were you a football player or any kind of?
No, I was actually a baseball player, and I played.
Okay.
I played baseball growing up, and I was really good.
You look like a fullback, you look like an offensive lineman or a fullback to me, man, or a linebacker maybe.
I weighed in 209 the other day, so
okay.
So I'm lean, but I'm strong. And
yeah, man.
That comes along with the training for boxing. Where was I?
So you're talking a little bit. You realized you're a little bit of high school, and you're telling me about how you did your second year in high school, and that.
Oh yeah, so I got into whatever was thrown at me, and I remember being a bouncer, and drugs were first introduced to me as a bouncer, where I was working 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning in Boston on State Street, which is all the nightclubs. I remember cocaine was introduced to me to stay up all night and party, and that was great. Now I look forward to every Friday night and getting through the week, and couldn't wait till Friday because it was drugs, sex, and alcohol.
Yeah,
that was my. I always say drugs, sex, and alcohol was my God. Then after that, I went through that stage, and then I met a girl who I ended up marrying. And my life calmed down a little bit, as far as the partying, but I fell into the lap of a mortgage broker, and he liked my personality, and he said, hey, you'll be great at this job, and this was like a refinance boom, and I think I was 20 years.
Like 2005, 6, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. It was like 3 years after high school, 4 years after high school. And I was 20 years old, 21 years old, and I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. And it was I was successful. I was making $100,000, you know, as a 20-year-old kid. I bought my first house when I was 21. Like I was, and I ended up buying a house the next street over from my mom just to make sure that everything was up to par over there. And then I developed a new love of the business for the drinking. You know, liquid lunches was awesome to me. Like, what other job can you go to lunch and get boozed up and make, you know, $10,000 commission, right? So that's where it just started gradually getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
From that point forward. And it was because of all the money was coming in. I met a girl. We ended up getting married, and with that kind of revenue and the amount of money I was making, the bigger the scale was for me. As far as, you know, I bought a $500,000 home when I was 25 years old.
What was important to you then? I'm curious. Like, one of the things I'm thinking, like, what was important to you then? You're talking about, like, you know, as a bouncer, you were, you know, it was drugs, sex, booze, you know. So what, at that time, what was important to you then? What was it that you know?
What was important to me when I was a bouncer?
No, now in the next chapter in the mortgage.
The next chapter was money.
Yeah.
Money was my new god.
Yeah.
And the more money I made, the more I was buying, and I was trying to buy happiness. I thought I was happy, you know, but it was an impulse thing. It was trying to fill a void with a big house, and I had to make sure I had 5 acres so I could have all these horses and all these animals, a beautiful wife and a baby, and fancy cars, you know, Porsches and Jaguars. And what happened was I got so into the drive to make money and be at work all day and be at work all night.
I'm thinking
home.
Like Ben Affleck in like Boiler Room or something like that, man.
It was more like Wolf of Wall Street with Leoncello DiCaprio. I was a wild man. You know, I would go out with realtors, and I was the life of the party, and I would come home wrecked. And my wife at the time was not having it, you know, and it was an every night thing. It wasn't, you know, hey, honey, it's just once a week. I got to make money. It was to the point where this was my new high. This was my new addiction, was going out, getting wrecked, and drowning what I thought was, you know, filling a void. I was just drowning that out. Like, with money, I was not a happy person. So this is where the story gets a little bit from, you know, a 6 to a 10. So I was making all this money. I got the wife anything she wanted. She was a stay-at-home mom with my beautiful newborn boy. But money was still my god, and I was still out of the house, and I was still doing, you know, awful things as far as, you know, loyalty, you know, as far as loyalty to friends, my wife. And she started to distance herself, and I started to sleep on the couch. Now, this is about 8 months into my marriage, and the first thing I thought of was Mom slept on the couch when we were kids, and Dad slept in the bed.
Wow.
It really fucked me up, you know, and it really brought me to, wow, my marriage already failed, and she's a piece of shit. You know, it wasn't my fault. I'm not doing anything. I'm paying the bills and doing everything right because I'm supporting her. That's what was going on in my fucked up head at the point. And I remember being at work, and it was about, you know, 6 months to 7 months sleeping on the couch. We just grew apart. And I remember my cell phone rang. It was my neighbor. I'm like, why the hell is my neighbor calling me? And he was like, hey, is everything all right over at your house? And I said, yeah, why? And he's like, there's cops surrounding your house right now. I'm like, what? So then I called my wife at the time, and we had Verizon as far as, like, you know, I could tell she was on the other phone with that beeping noise that it makes if you're on the other line. And I could see that she was on the other line or hear that she was on the other line. So I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I get in my car. I'm like 40 minutes away. I keep calling her. She's not picking up. I call the police station and say, hey, listen, I have a wife and a baby at home. What's going on? And they said, hold on a second. I'm still driving. They pick up the detective or the attendant picks up the phone, a cop, whatever. And he said, can you come into the station? We have a few questions for you. Now, me, I didn't do anything, so I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, is everything okay with my baby and my wife? He said, yes. I said, fine, I'll be right there. As soon as I pulled up, my car was surrounded. I was handcuffed. Now, this was about 6:30 at night. And what I found out later, it was all premeditated. My wife was originally from Florida. When she moved up here to be with me, married me, had a baby, and I was handcuffed. And my town doesn't have a holding cell because it's such a small town. I think there's only a few hundred.
What do they charge you with?
A verbal assault. Now,
what the fuck is that? What is that?
A verbal assault. It's exactly what it is. It's a verbal assault. Now, you have to remember, I'm in Boston, right? What happened in Boston, 12, 13 years ago?
And by the way, I'm not downplaying. I'm not downplaying abuse of any kind. When I had read that before, like verbal assault, like what is that? Like you're stupid, you're this. What? I'm thinking like I just don't know or understand. So what is that?
So she basically said that I verbally threatened to kill her.
Okay.
Whether it was like, hey, her words were, I'll have you whacked. And I don't even use terminology like that. It was like something out of Casino or Goodfellas.
Okay,
and
that clarifies, because I think it's different. When you threaten to kill somebody or have somebody killed, that's a whole different thing. When you said I'd read verbal abuse, I was like, so you didn't say nice, like what? I didn't get that. So that makes sense. Anyhow, I just wanted to know like what they charged you, what that was.
Now, and maybe it's exaggerated, whatever it was, right? So if it was, I vaguely remember the conversation the night before. We got in an argument, and she said, I hope you croak. And I said, I hope you croak too. It was something stupid like that. That was it. But it was her twisted words that got her to keep me away. Now, to keep me away means that she could get in her car and go to Florida, and that's what she did.
Yeah.
Now, why was I arrested? Because of Jerry Remy's son killing that girl 12 years ago. When Jerry Remy's son killed that girl, at first it was just a verbal assault, and then they arrested him. They let him go a couple hours later, and then he killed her. So in Massachusetts, I'm not sure if it's everywhere. In Massachusetts, you have to be held for 8 hours. So I was arrested at 7 o'clock, 8 hours. I missed a bail bondsman at midnight. I'm in there all weekend. When I got out, she cleaned out my bank accounts, and she took my Escalade and went to Florida. I had a restraining order, so I couldn't say, where's my kid? What the fuck? I couldn't do any of that. And it was a good 6 to 7 months before I actually even had contact with my son, and that's where most of the damage was done, as far as internally. The doctors at the moment, I couldn't deal with it at all. I remember hanging curtains up to my kid's playroom because I couldn't even walk past it without being screwed up about it, seeing his toys and seeing his shit. And how could she do this to me? So I went to the doctor and I said, I'm having a really difficult time with this. I am drinking a lot. I'm drinking a fifth, which I think is the biggest bottle of vodka you can buy. I was drinking a fifth a night. And I was just a wreck. I was just a total disaster. And the doctor was like, hey, I can help you out with something. I'm going to give you benzamines to help you with the coping. Now that's like a lethal, whatever you want to call it, just a lethal combination of alcohol and benzos. I was blacking out, and I was doing crazy like police chases and getting into trouble. And, it just got out of control. Then he cut me off from the benzo. So what's your next best thing to get that high was opiates, and I was snorting them, and and at this point I'm on the street looking for them. So obviously I started to lose everything. This is very sad, but it would tell you the condition I was in. About 7 months into 2016, it was probably the peak of my worst I've ever been. The animal control showed up with trailers to seize all my animals because I wasn't feeding them what I thought I was feeding them, or I wasn't giving them flat out, I wasn't giving them the care they needed, and I was neglecting them because of my own selfishness to drink and drug. And they took all my animals. They took my horses. They took everything I had, sheep, alpacas, a whole fucking Dr. Doolittle farm. And I was going into court looking like shit, and they let me go with that because I voluntarily let them take my animals without a fight. Then it got carried over to my job, me losing my license as a mortgage broker because of the pending criminal charges, which means I couldn't pay my bills, which means if you don't have a good credit score at the time, you couldn't sustain a mortgage license. So how could you tell someone how to control their finances if you're a friggin' mess yourself, right? So that's the way the Division of Banks looked at it. So I lost my license, lost my job. Then I lost myself completely, where I tried committing suicide because of the pain I was in. Just tried overdosing on everything you can think of, all the benzos I had, all the opiates I had, any cocaine I had, and I drank myself to almost death, where at some weird point I sent my mother a text message saying that I'm sorry and I tried, and in that blackout state she looked at the signs and says, something's fucked up with this right now. And she came in, she kicked the door in, literally kicked my door in. And, 20, how old was I? Like 32 years old, naked in your bed, and your mother walking in on you is fucking weird. So that was it. And then unfortunately, I'm sorry. Let me take a few days before that, when I went to court to see my son, and the emails and the track record that I had with the court system and the lashing out on my ex about seeing my son all caught up to me in court, and the allegations of the drinking and the drugging and police chases and the whole nine yards. The judge said, hey, you're going to take this device and you're going to blow into it 3 times a day. And it was called SoberLink. And if you fail, you're going to lose the rights to your son. And that's when I went home and I said, I'm fucking done. Like, I can't do this. I can't live like this. I'm a failure. And then I tried to take my own life. And my mom, like I said, kicked in. I got the medical help that I needed. And I couldn't go to rehab. I couldn't go to detox because I only had 3 days to go see my son. So I was up between a rock and a hard place of what to do. And I had a new doctor at the time, and he said, you need to do this. And he told me a story. It's like an old story about a scorpion and a frog. I forget how the story exactly goes, but at the end of the day, it meant that an alcoholic's always going to say he's not an alcoholic. And he was absolutely right. Just like a scorpion's never going to say, I don't know why I stung you. I'm just a scorpion.
Right. Yeah.
So he gave me Librium, and I took the Librium, and I remember laying in bed, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I have 3 days. And I woke up, I blew an okay in that thing, and then I Googled boxing gyms. It was weird, right? It was just out of nowhere. I was like, I need to stay busy. And I walked into a boxing gym that I found online, and I said, this is what I'm dealing with. And the trainer at the time was like, okay, just this is what to do. And he gave me a jump rope, and I jump roped for like 10 swoops around, and I was completely winded. I looked like shit. And that's when I went to church and said, whoever's looking over me, I know I'm here for a reason, and I need to see my son. And I just prayed to whoever was watching over me to make sure that I could do this. And I told you about me looking down at my shoes and seeing dog shit on my boot, and I'm like, you know what, it's going to be a shitty road, but we can do this.
And so how has it been? Has it been a shitty road?
It was a shitty road. In my recovery, the first year is very shitty because the devil, in my belief, the devil tries to derail you at any chance he has. And any bad that you did, it will resurface, and it does have a full circle. And that was a lot of my toughest points of recovery was my first year. But I had to face the music. It was almost like the light pierced my heart, and I was bleeding out all that evilness that was in me. And I had to go through that. I had to deal with it. And I was triggered so many times, but I just kept my son's eyes and my focus. And that moment that I had with him in Florida, where I didn't see him for 7-8 months, and I saw him, and I lay down in a Trace lounge chair after a day of spending it in the pool with him falling asleep in my chest. And I took a picture of it. I have the picture, and I look at it every day as a bookmark. And that was the first time in my entire life, whether it was mom, dad, girlfriends, that I actually felt what love was, ever. So I had a few days of soberness, a little bit of clarity, and that was my light switch, was that moment. And I never went back. I kept my focus on boxing because it was what kept me sober for 24 hours. It's what kept me sober for 48 hours. And it's been almost 4 years now, and it still is what keeps me sober. I have my son.
Tell me about Sober Warriors and how you started that, because you're like teaching kids how to box, and is it your own gym, or you meet them at another gym? Like, what is that? How did the Sober Warriors start out?
So,
you got a really big following of that.
So I have a friend who has a gym out of Fall River, so my program is run out of that gym. And Fall River is like a small city in Massachusetts. Sober Warriors is mentoring, training, spiritual guidance as far as, what the Sober Warrior way is, living righteous and giving back. And it first started out with me just going into a sober home and giving my first testimony, not even knowing what a commitment was. Because I remember I never went to a detox. I never went to a rehab or any meetings. I didn't do it that way of recovery. I went to my brother's sober home. My brother has an addiction. He's in recovery as well. He was in a sober home, and he said, why don't you come do a commitment here? So I brought a heavy bag, gave a commitment, a testimony, and said, this is what worked for me. And that's what sparked the idea in the story of Sober Warriors, was going around to sober homes, giving these guys an opportunity to release their endorphins a different way, and knowing that it worked for me and showing them the way.
So you deliver heavy bags to different sober homes and things like that?
Yeah.
Boxing bags, like people like,
Yep, boxing bags and gloves, and that's where the Sober Warriors started, was with just that simple way of recovery for me. Is just hitting a bag. Instead of being triggered, we're triggered, and it's supposed to happen. It's managing your coping, and that was a way to manage mine. So, and I dealt with a shit show of a story as far as what they heard. So if I was doing something right, it was hitting a bag, and that's one thing, that one tool will help them. So then I got my recovery coach certificate, and I'm a recovery coach. So I took the recovery coach certificate through the state, and I started my own program, which is a nonprofit, and it's really mentoring and guiding these men and women to their own road, and feeding the homeless is another way that helps with my recovery. And I have so many partners as far as what we've done in the past with shows and venues and so forth, as far as awareness. And I was just recently recruited from there's a couple former New England Patriots players that they go to schools and they speak to the seniors and juniors about the choices they have with alcohol and drugs. Because in high school it was just beer, maybe a little bit of pot here and there, but now it's needles and opiates and everything you can think of in high school. So it's more of like an educational program that is run from the New England Patriots players, and they recruited me to come speak with them, and I was scheduled to go and speak in April, but that was obviously postponed because of cancellation from the pandemic. So that's going to be in the future plans as far as revisiting that. As far as my journey in Sober Warriors, we continue to do that on a daily basis. I am a recovery coach. I have strangers calling me from all around, the whole country, as far as, who needs help, and, just some guidance and whatever it is, whether it's an email, whether it's an instant messenger. But it was just my divine purpose is, what I'm doing. And it's really my message of hope, as far as where I was, what I lost. Could have easily just said, fuck it, but I couldn't even fathom the idea of me taking my own life and leaving my baby boy.
No way, man.
Here, without a dad and without knowing his dad because he was still so young. But I've grown so much, and with growing in recovery, I've been growing with the sport, and I became pretty good, and that came with a lot of hard work and a lot of determination.
And now you're a professional, right? Now you're a professional.
Yeah, I'm a professional boxer, and I was signed by Jimmy Birchfield Sr. The promoting company is CES Boxing. They're the biggest on the East Coast, and Vinny Paziano was signed by them. Pina Manfredo Jr. And that's like all these divine signs, right? I talked to you about my purpose.
Yep.
And growing up, I remember watching there was a show called The Contender, and Sylvester Stallone was the host of it.
Yep.
And I remember Peter Manfredo Jr., he was a finalist, and I'm like, oh, this guy can fight. This is cool. Like, I'd love to be on the show. Like, these guys are lucky. And now today, like, probably 2 months before the shutdown, I was sparring Peter Manfredo Jr.
Wow.
So it's just amazing, like, and, meeting Vinny Paziano, the Paz Man, and Dave Bautista from the WWE, he was just signed by the company. So the family's growing, but it's not about my boxing, and that's what people kind of, misinterpret. That's just the stage to say, look what this guy is doing and what he's done in 3 years, and it's a total turnaround.
So what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to do? Like, where do you want to take Sober Warriors? Like, what's in your mind? Like, what do you want to do?
So I was actually speaking to my girlfriend about this a couple months ago. My goal is obviously to have my boxing career as the foundation of who I am and what we're built to do for other people. And obviously to train, you never know, I might be training a world-class fighter one day that chose me because of his bad childhood, or he could relate to me. But my ultimate plan is to obviously grow in the recovery community, and a lot of churches have gone belly up. And my idea in my dream is to buy these churches, and these big Catholic churches they don't use anymore, turn them into arenas and a safe haven, and a way where to do a sermon or meetings, but the rectory part, to have the rectory as the sober living building, sober
really
community.
Cool, man.
And that's our goal. And I've been blessed with just meeting awesome people, and I know everyone that comes into my life is sent from God, and He's just making sure that the word travels, that there is hope, and to never give up.
I look at life a lot like it's a, a lot of people will say, like, I'm screwed on this, on that, and I try to remind myself all the time that, what you're going through right now is not your story. Like people, it's not the story of your life. It's hard. It's easier to tell somebody else than to live it, but I'll say, like, it's actually just a chapter, man. And in any book or movie or story or TV show or whatever it is, like it would be really boring if, like, the main character just came out and then everything was cool. Like, these are called, the stuff that happens is called plot twists. Then you can see, like, how the character is affected and when all hope was lost and,
Right.
stuff like that makes your life, makes it interesting. But I just, I really like your story when you sent it to me. Like I said, I saw the video, and then I read some of what you had told me right here. We're going to include actually all the story that you had sent me over. We'll include it in this feature here too. And it just really struck me. I mean, obviously, what we talk about is making the best out of whatever your situation is. Lemons into lemonade out of lemons, and it all.
Yeah, I always tell my guys, like,
hope, man. It's all just about having hope, like.
Yeah, and and I believe that everyone goes through pain in life for a reason, and it's put in front of you. And I never really understood what the terminology is, growing up. Like, love can move mountains. Like, how the fuck can love move that big ass mountain? But it's not the point of love moving the mountain. It's the mountain of evil and trouble, and pain is only temporary. And that's the other thing I wanted to get to is I told you drugs, sex, and alcohol was my God. And then it was money was my God. And then I found my true God, and that's Jesus who saved me. And it took a good year into my recovery to say, oh, there you are. You know what I mean? Like, it just took that amount of time of growth. And here I am, in this pandemic and still training, but we're still getting ready, and I'm still
we're at
sober.
day number, I mean, as we're recording this now, this is April 29th, so, we've been quarantined now since, like, the 15th, 18th of March. It's, like, really, really, really freaking surreal that can't get a haircut, can't go to a restaurant. There's no baseball. There's no nothing. It's just this.
I'm doing a lot of coaching on the phone. A lot of people are struggling out there. And the addiction and mental health goes hand in hand. And this is really a difficult time. And on my social media platforms, I really stress out. I'm always here. I'm always here. I'm always here. And the little things like on social media, I believe that it's almost like some people's diaries. If you post a meme that's kind of negative, you kind of see what kind of day they're having. So I tend to reach out to those people and see how they're doing, and see, let them know that there's always someone there to talk to. And like I said, you just gotta pay attention to those things, because it's not like a broken bone where you can visualize a cast or a crutch.
Yeah.
With mental illness, it's really just you get to have the third eye for that, as far as your intuition on what you feel.
I like it, man. How do people get back in touch with you?
They can look me up on www.soberwarriors.org. They can, my cell phone, my direct line is on there. They can look me up on Facebook and Instagram. It's all there.
Really kick-ass. We're going to include links to all this in here. And I liked you like when I do the first 2-3 minutes of your video. Like you better now. And just
Thanks, brother.
really admire what you're doing. You seem like a really super cool guy. And yeah, it's gonna be.
When are we trying to get this thing going? Like
Yeah,
as far as like
this will be actually for those that are watching right now. This will be in the next issue. So this will be in our main.
Oh, are we live? Are we live right now?
No, we're not live right now. We're not broadcast. This is recorded. So this will be actually in our upcoming. It'll be in our upcoming issue, our next issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, man.
So
Anything else?
No, all good, man. This has been another. I'll wrap it up. This has been another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com. And, get back to Chad. The guy's super cool, man. So if you hang on just a second, I'll stop the recording.